Hello, everybody. This is Mike Young with digitalnomad.net. And if you guys have been following the channel, you know that I paid a visit to the guy that we're talking with today, Don from Intuitive out in California. Welcome, Don.
Hey, Mike. Thanks for having me. Great to be on with you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks you so much for being here. I consider you, as we were talking before the show here, probably the foremost expert at this point in time on what we're going to discuss today. And we're going to discuss something that affects every Tesla Model S and X out there, if it's got all-wheel drive at least, and all Model X's do, up until today when we're recording this, which is early April 2021. And we don't know what's going on with Model S and X's going forward because they haven't actually delivered any that I know of in 3 months. I think the whole quarter had 0 deliveries, and they're retooling right now. But this affects every S and X pretty much that's on the road, definitely the rear, and it won't affect the front if you don't have all-wheel drive on your S. So I don't even know where to begin, but let's just dive into it. So the purpose of this video really is to convince anybody watching that there really is something that needs to be addressed here. The only way that you wouldn't want to address anything on your Model S or X Tesla is if you're okay with a combination of front-end vibration under hard acceleration and combined with severe inner tire wear at the rear, right? So, Don, why don't you kind of lead us off here, and we'll dive into each part in detail. And you can see behind me, I've got I don't know if this is an S or an X rear suspension. It's off of your website, Don, but it shows kind of, and let me move out of the way, you can see what's there
Right.
in the rear suspension.
Yeah, so that image behind you, that's the shot of the rear camber and tow arms. And just quickly to go over it, you can see that the tow arm or tow link is, it has some adjustability. You've got about 3.5 millimeters on either side from the neutral position. Camber arm has no adjustment. And that's why, as far as the inner tire wear goes, you've got people that go to Tesla and say, hey, I've got this problem with my rear tires, they're wearing out. I need to get it aligned. And so they'll do an alignment, and then they'll show you the alignment sheet, and they say, look, everything's green. Everything's all into spec, but you still have the problem. And basically, the reason for that is even when the toe is in correct alignment, there's no adjustment for the camber at all. And so you're pretty much stuck with whatever you've got. And the Tesla spec is a huge range. It's like from, depending on the S or the X, it's between about 0.8 to minus 0.8 to minus 2.75, somewhere in that range. And as soon as you start going over like minus 1.25, then you start noticing that inner wear.
Okay. Hey, Don, why do you think Tesla didn't dial in any adjustability on that camber arm?
I mean, honestly, it's fairly common for most manufacturers not to have rear adjustable camber.
Okay.
So I think Tesla, especially in the early days, tended to follow the ways of Mercedes, and a lot of the parts in the Tesla are Mercedes parts. Yeah. So I think that's probably what it was. And I don't know that they realized at the time, you know, when you combine low profile tires with arguably the heaviest vehicle you can buy and so much torque, I mean, it's going to wear out those tires. And if you've got negative camber, most of the weight of that car is on that inner edge. So
okay, now just to make this a video for even the layperson, what is negative camber? I mean, I will generally show people like the tires usually straight up and down, right? But then
that's right.
If the camber's off, it's going to be one way or the other. And what happens here in the rear of a Tesla?
Yeah, so Tesla, same as any other car. Basically, you've got the rear wheels. So the camber is a reference to the tilts from the top of the wheel. So you need some negative camber for proper cornering and good stability. So you would never want your camber to be at 0. And you know, a lot of people think you might want it at 0, but you don't, because when you take turns, the weight of the car shifts to the outside wheel, and by having the negative camber, that allows the greater contact patch between the tire and the road. Okay. So you do want some negative camber, but when you start to get too much.
Yeah, let me ask you real quick before you move on. What about vehicles with solid rear axles? Right, you can't adjust the camber, and it's straight up and down all the time. I guess it's not designed to be a good handling vehicle if it's got a solid rear axle, right?
Yeah, and that's been one of the issues with solid rear axles forever. Is just they're just not the most. I mean, even the Ford Explorer, if you can remember years ago, they used to have a solid rear axle, and they had so many problems with their cars going out of control that I'm pretty sure they eventually changed that and changed to an independent suspension, because there was a lot of lawsuits, if I remember correctly. This was probably
Yes.
20 years ago or so. But.
Yeah, I remember. I just wanted to touch on that because there are some people that still have, I mean, actually I have a Toyota Tacoma truck and it's still got a solid rear axle, but that's a pickup truck, right? So.
Right. Yeah. And it's, if you're not dealing with low profile tires, I suppose you could get away with that a little more. So like a truck has a much cushier tire and more rounded tire. So it kind of accommodates that lack of camber adjustment.
Yes.
But yeah, ideally, I mean, if you're looking for the best performance and the best handling and safety, then independent axle with adjustable camber is what you would want.
Okay. So in this case, people's rear tire, this is only half of the issue that we're talking about, by the way, but this issue with the rear tires, if you hear about somebody that thinks they don't have the problem, they probably haven't crawled underneath their car. Is that right? To take a look at that inner edge of that those rear tires.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's definitely some people who don't have the problem, and there's different reasons for that. So reason number one would be the profile of the tire. So if you've got the 19-inch wheels or the 20-inch wheels, and you've got a higher profile tire, it's going to accommodate for some of that camber. So that's one thing. Reason number two would be the age of your bushings in your camber arm. So especially on the original Teslas, like pre-2016 and before, when they had dual rubber bushings that would sag over time, and then that would increase, basically the weight of the car would push those rubber bushings in and add more negative camber like that. So that's another problem. So you would have,
in the older Teslas, you would have the camber going more and more negative as the car ages?
That's right. That's absolutely true. Right. And for example, with the original Model S that I had was 2012, and it ended up getting totaled a couple of years ago, sitting off to the side of the road.
You don't.
But before that happened, my camber had gotten so bad that I would have to change tires every 5,000 miles. It was horrible. And 21-inch tires are not cheap. So it's like, it's like the equivalent of getting an oil change, for maintenance on a car, and you've got to spend, $500 at least for a couple new tires.
Yeah, that's no good. It doesn't make any economic sense for sure. And let me also mention one other thing. Even if people don't notice this, right? I think we all agree that you've got automatic negative camber dialed into the car from the factory, and that's the way that's the way your car will be ongoing if you stick with factory specs. Mm-hmm. And if you're not crawling underneath your car on a regular basis to check those insides of the tires, what's going to happen, because it happened to me, is eventually you're going to wear that down to the steel belts in those tires and potentially blow out a tire completely unknowingly as you're driving. Yep.
That's true. And it's happened to me. And it's happened, I've read it countless times on the forums. Yeah. But one of the things that's interesting about reading on the forums and Facebook groups is somebody will say, hey, I've got this inner tire wear. And a lot of people will chime in and say, like, well, I don't have that problem. Therefore, the problem doesn't really exist. And it's, you're the problem. You're like the issue. You're too hard on the gas, or your alignment's off or something. It's like, yeah, it's not that simple. Just because you don't have the problem doesn't mean it's not a problem for others.
Yeah, because I think it is. And whenever I pointed out to people, like you and I talked to yesterday, I met somebody who's owned a Model X for a couple of years, actually. And he put about 45,000 miles on his tires. That's as much as he could get out. But he's a very light driver. Keep that in mind. Very, very light driver. And he didn't think he had a problem with this, specifically the rear tire wear, until I asked him to crawl underneath your car and take a look. And he did. And shortly after that, he replaced his tires because they were so bad.
Yeah, no, it's dangerous for sure. Like, I remember I went to Tesla and they told me, oh, you got inner wear in your tires. You need to replace those. And I kind of looked at it real quick. I'm like, what is this guy talking about? They're not bad.
Yeah.
And then when I got home, I looked underneath, like way underneath on the very inside edge. I was like, oh my God, you can see the steel belted radials just popping through. You know, this is years ago.
Yep. That's what you're saying. Just like you said, very inside edge. You can't even get down on your knees and look straight at it because you can't really get a good visual on that inner edge unless you crawl underneath the car. I mean,
yeah, your head really has to be on the level with the bottom of the tire to see it.
Yeah, and then if you're just looking at the outsides, like I'll usually check my tire wear. Oh, you know, just kind of stick my fingers over there in the tread, right on the outside. Well, this is the inner tread. That looks good. That looks like a brand new tire. But my outer tread would look just like that. And I'd say, oh, we're fine. We're all good. Until you crawl underneath that car and you realize you could have a blowout at any second.
Right.
Yeah. So anyway, all right. So I don't know where we left off, but
yeah. So I think I think we've definitely covered the reason why it happens. Some people don't have the problem, and some people do, but it's definitely a problem for a lot of people, and it's worth checking. And I see people with blowouts all the time, and I always tell them, you know, when I see it on the group, Facebook groups and forums, I said, you better get down and check and see if the inner tire wear is severe. You know, if your radials are popping through. Yep.
And also, let me think. I know that when I visited you in California a few months ago on some of our journeys, you know, we went to this one alignment shop where they had people there that wanted their tires to look like that, right? They wanted the rear camber negative, severe negative. And one of the guys, I think we asked, we said, like, how long are your tires lasting? I think he said like 2 months, right? Yeah. That's what he would get a set of rear tires.
Right. But for him, it's worth it because that's like, you know, he's like a kid, you know, he likes this style with the extreme negative camber.
Yeah.
And it's not as bad because on his car, I don't remember, it's a lighter Subaru.
Impreza, I think, so, yeah.
Right. So it's not as bad as a Tesla, which weighs so much more, but yeah, I mean, I guess if that's your thing. And I have had a couple of people call me up and want to purchase my adjustable arms because they want the opposite. They want more negative camber. They want the stance sort of look.
Can you do that with your parts?
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's so much range on the parts. You can go, you know, negative or positive by a lot. So
okay. Oh, one other thing before we move on, I want to point out about Model X specifically is the staggered wheel design where the rear tires are wider than the fronts and the rear rims are wider, right? So like on an S, like I've owned a car in the past. Actually, it was, and I still own it. It was a Lexus CT200, and it had four-wheel independent suspension with low profile performance tires, and it has negative camber from the factory, like you're saying. But what I used to do is I'd put my worst tires on the back. Like I'd wear them out in the front, rotate them to the back, buy 2 new tires, stick them on the front, and then as they got evenly worn on the front, then I'd finally stick them on the back for the rest of their life. But you can do that on Model S, right? Because they're the same. But on Model X, you can't do that.
Right. So ideally, if you really have your alignment dialed in correctly, and you've got a Tesla that's an all-wheel drive Tesla, then you really don't have to worry about rotating your tires so much. They should wear pretty evenly. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, that's one of the problems with the staggered tires is you're going to end up needing to replace the rears, and you can't swap them front to back or left to right or anything else. So.
Yep. So Model X has very limited ability to get good tire wear, and I don't think it was ever designed as a long distance, high mileage traveler, right? Because if it was, it wouldn't have that kind of a setup. But it is what it is, and thankfully you are helping to design and have designed a solution. So is there anything else we need to talk about with the rear before we move to the front end vibration?
Yeah, so one thing I think people should know, and one of the questions I get a lot is, since the toe is already adjustable, do I need to get the adjustable toe arms as well as the adjustable camber arms? And it kind of depends. And if you send me your alignment sheet, I can look at it and kind of give you a better idea. But definitely if you lower the car, or if you have the car set to automatically lower, which you definitely need to on the X, which I'm sure we'll get into with the half shaft issue.
Mm-hmm.
In that case, definitely you need to have the tow arms, because what's going to happen is you're going to get to about, it depends. We're talking about millimeters or fractions of millimeters here. So every Tesla is going to be a little bit different, but you're going to be able to dial in the camber to about minus 1.5 or so, and then you're going to run out of adjustment room for the tow. You're not going to have enough tow out to bring it into spec. So, because as you can see in the picture behind you, you've got 3.5 millimeters left or right of tow adjustment, and it's really not enough.
Right, I gotcha.
So with the adjustable arms the adjustable tow arms we have, we've got about a good 15 millimeters on either end to play with.
That's huge. Well, that brings up another point, that the suspension height and setting. Now, some early Model S's didn't have air suspension; they had coils, and you couldn't adjust them. Some Model S in general, if you have air, it's got like 5 settings, whereas I think you've got 4 settings, right? I think Model X has 5 height settings. And now, if you don't use any kind of adjustable parts, like if you have these stock camber arms, just to let folks know, again, who may not be aware of this, what happens if you drive on lowest suspension setting rather than normal at all times? What will happen to your tires in that case?
Yeah, so when the height of the car changes, the geometry of the suspension also changes. And when you go lower, you're gonna get much more negative camber and toe in as well. So
it's gonna exacerbate this issue. It's gonna make it much worse.
Absolutely. Yeah, if you drive in the low setting or the very low setting, then it's definitely going to make the inner tire wear issue worse.
Okay.
So that's why if you get the adjustable arms, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
That's fine.
If you get the adjustable arms, you install them, and then you have the alignment shop adjust them in the right height where you normally drive. So if you're normally going to drive in low, have the alignment guy do the adjustments in that position.
That's key. That's very critical. Okay,
Yeah.
So that we make sure that the position you're driving in most often has the exact perfect alignment that you want on your vehicle.
Right. And one more thing, you need to actually educate the alignment shop of the settings that you want, because otherwise they're just going to look at the Tesla spec and they'll be like, oh, well, it's in spec. Well, yeah, it was in spec before you installed the parts, but you still have the problem.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, you need to tell them, okay, in the rear, I want a -1 with the camber and about 0.15, 0.2 for the toe. And then the front, they can dial into spec, as close as possible.
Yeah, and not every shop's going to want to do that, as I found out. And I know that you have a list of recommended shops, or you're developing one anyway. So that's helpful, I know.
Yeah. So the thing is, when you're finding a shop to install the parts, you have to find a shop that has experience with aftermarket control arms, because most alignment shops, they're only used to tweaking the eccentric bolts, and that's about all they know. So, when you give them something kind of foreign like an aftermarket control arm, some people just don't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
Even though it's really not complicated by any stretch of the imagination from a mechanical standpoint, but still some people don't. So if you look, you can look on Yelp or Google reviews or whatever, and you can see, if they got pictures where they're working on, lowered cars, more custom type cars, they're probably a better bet than going to like Firestone. Nothing wrong with Firestone, but just, they just generally, those type of big corporate wheel alignment shops, they don't have the experience or the training to do it.
Or the out of the box thinking. They want to stay straight into their specs that they get off of their computer systems. So it's understandable.
Yeah. But the specs are okay. They just need to refine it more than that. Because that's one thing I want to clear up. We're not putting the Tesla out of spec. We're well within spec. It's just we're in a spec that is closer to a more even tire wear range. That's it.
Okay.
So,
you mentioned Tesla. Let me ask a question about that. My experience has been I can't get Tesla, like a Tesla service center, to do this. So I had to go to independent. Is that something that is generally the case?
That's a great question. And I tell you, it's all over the place, because I've called a few local service centers here in the LA area, and I said, look, if I come to you with these adjustable control arms, can you install them and align it? Because there's a problem here with the inner tire wear, and this is, I need adjustable arms. And the guy's like, yeah, we're aware of the problem. We can install it for you. And that kind of blew me away. I was like, oh, you actually will install them and align them. And he's like, yeah, because really you have no one else to go to because it's a Tesla, which is not really true. But in general rule of thumb with a Tesla, you want to take it to Tesla or a mechanic that specializes in Tesla.
Yeah.
So he was saying basically, you just have to sign a waiver that says that Tesla is not responsible if the parts break or the parts were to do damage to your car or whatever. It's very reasonable.
Yeah.
But then I talked to other people in different states and even in different countries, and they say, oh no, Tesla won't do it. So I think their policy is not really kind of set in stone, and it just varies by service center to service center.
Okay. Yeah, it does. That's for sure. So something to keep in mind. Another thing I want to mention is that we're not talking about Model 3 and Model Y, in case someone is watching this video and they're asking, we're not talking about those at all. As far as we know, they are different design. Is that correct?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so we're not talking about those. Another thing is we talked about air suspension and different heights. And I want to throw something out. I know you and I've already talked about it, but someone might be wondering who is watching this. Well, why don't I just ride that car all the way at the highest height all the time? And that will bring my negative camber, it'll get rid of it, right? And I guess it will, but it causes other problems and exacerbates other known issues, right?
Right. Well, I mean, for one thing, the software is going to kick you out of the high setting once you reach a certain speed.
True.
So even if you could ride at the highest setting, I mean, if you could, it would be great, I guess, in that capacity. But I mean, you're losing aerodynamics, you're losing your handling ability. I mean, what's one of the nice things about lowering your Tesla is it improves the handling, it improves aerodynamics and efficiency, so you can get a little more juice out of your battery and whatnot.
Yep.
But yeah, I think you're kind of segueing into the half shaft issue. So if you were to drive your Tesla, your S or your X in the high position, you're putting your half shafts and especially the CV joints on the ends of the half shaft in a really awkward position that's going to cause an enormous amount of wear on them really quickly. So for the
talking about the front,
X,
right? The front.
Yeah, the front. That's a good point. So just a little history on that. So Tesla first came out with the S, right?
Yep.
I mean, the Roadster, of course, but then they came out with the S, which was more like the
production,
more luxury consumer car.
Yeah.
And that was originally designed as a rear wheel drive car. And then as, I think it was 2014, 2015, a couple of years after they started producing it, they decided to add the front motor, which is a cool idea.
Yeah.
But in order to do that, now they're putting the motor and the gearbox above steering components and whatever else is built into the chassis already, right? Because they didn't want to build a new chassis just to add a new motor.
Right.
So that puts the half shafts at a pretty extreme angle. And the more of an angle your half shafts are at, the more that CV joints are going to bind up. And with the super torquey electric motors of a Tesla and such a heavy car, that's basically what happens. You're wearing out the CV joints, especially the outer CV joint. And we can get more into that if you want. But
But this is the front only you're talking about, right?
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, of course it's possible to happen in the rear too, but the rear is at a better angle because the motor is more on axis with the wheels.
Okay, and it was designed to be a rear drive car from the beginning, like you said. And those rear tires don't steer like the front ones do. So
that's another issue too. Is when you incorporate steering now into those CV joints, that also can increase the angle of the joint and cause more binding. It's
a lot of stuff packed in there. And as I sent to you, I know recently, it is true. If you guys search for it, you can even look. I think it's probably on one of my Model X groups on Facebook. I mentioned at some point that Elon Musk did admit that they made a mistake building an SUV on the Model S platform. He did admit that. You saw that, right, Don?
Yeah.
So
yeah, and I think, for any engineer out there, it becomes obvious fairly quickly when you look at it. It's like, this is just not, you're just not supposed to run half shafts at this kind of an angle.
yeah,
It's just too much.
yeah. So what happens when these things wear? Because you've very well described the situation and why they're going to wear. What happens? What does a driver notice? And what if someone says, I don't have an issue? Can you address those?
Right. Yeah, so there's a couple of different ways you're going to notice this. One is you're going to hear a clunking sound when, especially when you're turning in reverse or turning in general, you can hear some clunking sounds. And that's one type of wear. We can get into more details on that if you want. Another type of wear is it's in the raceway of the CV joint itself, which I can show you some pictures of.
Okay.
And what happens is it's called the outer CV joint is called the Rizeppa joint. So you've got in Tesla's case, you've got 8 like ball bearings. There's 16 millimeter ball bearings, and those are the CV joint is moving around, and as the CV joint moves around, when it's at an angle, those balls will be going back and forth like this within, it's called the raceway or the race, right? And as they're going back and forth, if you've got so much torque and so much weight, that ball is pushing so hard against that raceway that eventually what happens is called spalling. And that it basically is where the ball joint, the ball bearing, even though it's so smooth and round, it will dig itself into the race of the CV joint. And then what you've got is you've got this little bump now. You got this little imperfection. And then now that ball is going back and forth in that raceway over that imperfection. And at slow speeds, you don't notice any problems really. But as you get to a certain frequency, at a certain speed, now that back and forth movement is you're feeling that vibration.
Yeah. So yeah, I've noticed that as a Model X owner. For folks who don't know me, I've owned one for 4 years. It's got 166,000 miles on it right now. So, and I'm the only driver. I think my wife has driven it once, maybe. So I'm well aware of what happens when these. I've never heard it described this way. Thank you for describing it though, because it allows people to understand what's actually going on. But from my standpoint as a driver, I've just noticed that there's a vibration in the front end. I've noticed that it gets worse at higher suspension settings, and it gets better at lower suspension settings. So why would that be? So it kind of depends on where that gouge is, where that spalling occurs. So if it's towards the ends of the raceway, then when you lower the car, now, like when the half shaft is more in alignment with the wheel, now that ball doesn't travel so far. It just goes in the raceway a little bit right in the center. But if the axle's steep, now it's got to go full range of motion with the ball. Okay. Right? So when you lower the car, if that ball is more now in the center, just going back and forth a little bit, then you may not be hitting that gouge. The ball may not be rolling over the gouge anymore because you've changed the height of the suspension. Does that make sense? Yes. It would be easier if I could have it in my hands right now and show you. It'd be easier to understand. But yeah, well, in a future video we could discuss, maybe take a deeper dive into this. But for now, it seems to me, and you and I have discussed this. I am very aware of it, so I've noticed it on my Model X on the normal standard height of air suspension that you're supposed to drive in all the time. I get vibration continuously whenever I put my foot into it. And if you're a driver out there and you don't think this is happening with your car, here's my test. I was telling Don and I were talking about this before. Even Tesla told me to do this. Get your car going to a steady speed, maybe between 25, 35 miles an hour, steady speed, and then just floor it at that point. And you will know if you have the vibration or not. And in almost every case, you're going to feel something. It doesn't feel right in the front end. And so, but when I lower the suspension down, it goes away. Even though my half shafts, I know that are worn. I know that they're worn now at this point in time. And I've even had the fix. I've even had the Tesla updated parts as of summer of 2019. They did not work. They did not last more than a few months without the vibration returning. The only way I've seen to fix it, at least at this moment in time, is to lower the car down like you were talking about. Yeah. So again, depending on where that gouge is in the race,
lowering your car may be enough to solve the problem for you, at least temporarily, with the lowered car. With some people, it may not work. And with some people, I've heard some people say it makes the problem even worse because it depends on where that gouge is.
I see.
But at the end of the day, when you lower the vehicle, it takes a lot of stress off of that joint and helps to prevent wear. So if you can have Tesla replace the half shafts, hopefully under warranty still for you.
Yeah.
And then you lower the vehicle, now you're going to do yourself a big favor by not continuing to put too much pressure, not the gouging on that race.
Mm-hmm.
So here's the one thing. A lot of people ask me, will installing these parts void your warranty? And no, they won't. Unless Tesla can prove that somehow those parts cause damage to the car. So they can't void your warranty for it. But at least in the United States and Canada, that's the way it is.
Unless it's more like improper installation. Is that right? That would be a warranty void.
I don't. In terms of what, like?
Well, like I know that I believe your parts are probably the best parts out there, but there's always a chance that someone might install them in the wrong way. There's always that chance.
Yeah.
That's probably the only way that Tesla would get you, and that would be, that would not be common, because you and I discussed, in almost every circumstance, using those parts, installing them correctly is probably going to make the front end vibration issue get better, not worse.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah. So that's a very good point, and so they can't void your warranty for it, unless they could somehow prove it, but they could hassle you for it a little bit.
Right.
So that's why I'm thinking best solution would be just do the half shafts first, and then right away get the kit installed
immediately. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I got you.
Kind of goes on what I was telling you before, like how Tesla doesn't really have a solid policy from service center to service center. So some service centers will be like, yeah, no problem. There's, these parts aren't causing any problems. And you may go somewhere else and they're kind of more like, well, it's an aftermarket part, and I'm just trying to help people avoid getting into any kind of conflict with Tesla.
Right.
Just like an extended argument about something that just doesn't need to be dealt with.
Yeah, and also I think in the approach is also important. I think if someone approaches Tesla and says, "Oh, I got a problem with my car. I need you to do this," they might start to get defensive. But if you say, "Look, I want to have these installed. I know it's at my own risk or whatever," they may take a completely different attitude.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of it is, like you said, Tesla will probably develop a policy over time. But in the meantime, I'd say that anybody who owns a Model S and X or knows somebody that owns a Model S and X should pass this video along to them so that they can, hopefully the goal of this video is so that you will better understand the nature of the issue that's here and realize that we're not making it up. We're not blaming anybody. But if you want to improve your rear tire wear and you want that front end vibration to go away, this is the way to go, I think. And I think you've done a great job of showing that.
Oh, thanks. And I think most people at this point know. If they don't know about the inner tire wear issue, they definitely have heard about that, the half shaft acceleration shutter issue. That's posted literally multiple times weekly. It's like, people don't bother to search.
True. That's true. But let me also mention, Dom, what are your thoughts on this? That knowledge has really been, I'd say, more like within the last 6 months. That's what I think. I think before that, like a year or so ago, if someone brought this issue up, they said that, oh, you're making that up. It's a driver problem.
No, absolutely. Everything, and that's one of the things with the Tesla fanboys out there. Don't get me wrong, I love Tesla, but I'm not going to bias myself.
Yes.
But, it's always like, no, Tesla didn't do anything wrong. They couldn't have done anything wrong. And let me explain to you how you're the problem and you did something wrong.
Yeah, and there's not that much backlash anymore. I'd say within the last 6 months or so. Like you said, I think that so many more people know about it, and that's why I feel comfortable doing this video with you too, because if I go back 6 months to a year, there was a different culture around this. I think now, folks are more understanding and realize that you're just here to provide a solution for folks that would like a solution.
Yeah.
So
and one other thing I wanted to mention is with the wear on the half shafts, it's not so much how many miles you have on your car. It's more a matter of how much torque was applied to your car at a particular time, at a particular angle of the drive shaft. So, even just a couple of times, you can literally ruin your CV joints.
Yep.
So yeah, that's important, because otherwise, if somehow you could be really mellow on your car, for years and years, you could have 100,000 miles on your car and not really have this problem.
Yes. Or never raise the suspension, because once you start raising it, the chances of that happening are greater and greater, right?
Yeah. And here's another thing that's really interesting. I've read a lot of complaints online about how people say, like, I just had Tesla replace these half shafts and I'm 200 miles, 500 miles out from that service visit, and I've already got the problem back again.
Yeah.
Why is that? And, I can tell you, we've looked at a lot of, we've taken apart a lot of Tesla front half shafts lately. And one of the ones we took apart, which was interesting because it looked like a rebuild. And by the way, you'll probably get a rebuild when you go in to get new half shafts for your Tesla.
Yeah, and you don't know, right? You won't know if it's a rebuild because you won't see that part before they put it on. And in most cases, they won't even give you the old parts back. Is that right?
No, they will not give you the old parts back. They collect them and send them all back up north.
Okay.
But anyway, so one of the ones we took apart was a rebuild. And, first thing you do when you open up when you take the half shaft apart is you cut the old boots off. So I cut the boot off, and first thing I noticed was that the gear oil grease that they used was really thick, and that immediately struck me, because you can't have super thick gear oil in a joint like that, because then the gear oil can't penetrate deep into the it's really tight tolerances in there with how the metal fits together.
Yeah.
And so what happens when you use a really thick grease like that? It literally the parts literally scrape the grease away. So you end up with metal on metal. And so when I hear people saying, oh, it only lasted 200 miles, 500 miles, well, you may have one of these joints where they used the wrong grease. But some of them were okay. And they had a thinner, less viscous grease in there that can penetrate well. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I hear. Let me also mention something you and I discussed previously about the single or few incidents that might just mess those bearings up like you described. I remember this was years ago. This is probably in the first year of ownership, so probably 3 years ago. I had a day driving on some really fun mountain roads that were speed limit about 35, and I wasn't going much faster than that. But they were lots of fun because there's lots of tight left turns, tight right turns, and you're going back and forth, and you're really getting into that accelerator, mashing it down through the corners, feeling the just the car grip the road, and it was a lot of fun. But I can remember right after that, I started noticing a vibration, and I'm like, why would that happen? Right. This was 3 years ago, and my first instinct was, I just destroyed the half shaft.
Right. You absolutely did. Doing those power turns, jamming on the accelerator. That's it. You do that a couple of times, you're done.
Yeah. And that's sad, because I was well within a sane driving experience within the law, and yet somehow my car couldn't handle that. So yeah. But anyway, hopefully there'll be more of a solution for this in the future. I know we'll be talking about this in future videos, but for now, hopefully we've done a complete job, or as complete a job as we can here in early April 2021, of describing what's gone on with all these Model S's and X's produced up to this time by Tesla, and what Fixable's options are. The main option here, I say, is to contact you, Don, over at Intuitive, and that's spelled N-T-U-I-T-I-V-E. Is that right?
It's N and then the number 2, I-T-I-V-E.
That's right, N number 2. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay.
I was envisioning it in my mind. Yeah, I just didn't say. So yeah, that's your website too, right? If they type in N and the number 2, IT. I can't remember.
IVE. That's right.
Okay.
ITIVE.me.me.
.me. Okay, that's the website. But even if you go to a search engine, I can tell you if you put the letter N and the number 2 and what you think the spelling is, you'll find his website. And I know that from experience. So, and then, Don is real great with customer service. And as I mentioned, we'll be having some more videos where we take an even deeper dive into some more of the details of this. But for now, to pass this along to your Tesla owners so there at least can be hopeful that something can be done here, about the car. Because I know that there's been times when I've owned my vehicle and, like, as I've mentioned, 166,000 miles of driving over 4 years, I thought that there was never going to be a fix for this. So I'm really happy, Don, for the work that you're doing and have done. Yeah, because it benefits a lot of people. And there would be, and Elon Musk should thank you, because there would be a lot less happy Tesla owners without your work.
Oh yeah. I've gone to Tesla service centers and shown them the products, and they were thrilled to see it. I mean, this is a few years back, just the fact that they could offer some adjustability that they couldn't have before.
Yeah.
Was great for them, because then they don't have to deal with the customer complaining like, well, why is this a problem?
Yep.
Like, well, now they don't have to worry about that, but not everybody knows about it. So
yes. So hopefully this will help get the word out, and folks, comment below if you've used Don's products, share this with friends and anybody who's interested in Tesla, even especially people who want to buy maybe a used Model S or X. Very important to know. Yeah, very beneficial for somebody like that. And there's lots of them available now, which is great. And they're very affordable, which is also a good thing. So, but if you're going to buy an affordable car and then start eating through rear tires, then they need to know about the solution, right? So, all right. Well, thanks, Don. I think that's our video. I'm on the East Coast. Of course, you're over there on the left coast, and keep up the great work, as we said. And, we'll see you soon in the next video.
Sounds good. Thanks, Mike. Good being with you.
You're welcome. All right. Bye-bye.
All right. Take care.